Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to our Saltire St Andrew's Night White Cockade celebration. Some folks I know have come quite a long distance tonight to be with us, and some are a wee bit more local, but it's really very good to see everybody here tonight. Only yesterday, we heard that our singer for the evening, Alistair MacDonald, had taken ill suddenly with a suspected heart attack, and so was unable to perform. We're very disappointed that he can't be with us, but we really hope that he's better soon and wish him a speedy recovery. At the last minute, literally, we were very lucky that Roddy Johnston, a well-known musician in this part of Angus, stepped in to help us out. With our friend and fellow Saltire member, Bob Harley, to keep the show on the road. Before I hand over to Bob Stewart for a proper introduction, just a wee bit of housekeeping. It's not going to happen, of course, but if a fire alarm were to go off, there are 2 exits at the back and 2 at this side as well. And if you're looking for the loos, then there's 1 at each end, the ladies at this end of the corridor and the gents at the other end. And could I just say, please do join us for special refreshments after the performance. And if I could just mention in passing too that on the 14th December, we're having another musical evening, and I hope you might come back for that. It's an evening of fiddle, song and accordion with Yvonne Downey and Lindsay Downey and Scottish country dancers, so you'd all be very welcome to come back for that as well. So, over to Bob now, who's going to introduce Roddy properly and tell us a bit about the Jacobite flag that you can see over on this side of the chancel.
Some of you will probably have seen this flag before, because it was in the Glenclover Church for many years, for quite a few years. This is not the original Forfarshire Regiment, Ogilvie Regiment flag, but this one was made for a reenactment of the Forfarshire Regiment coming back from Culloden. If you've read your history about that, they made their way from Culloden to Ruthven Barracks, where they reassembled and decided to make a decision not to go any further with the rebellion. So the then David Ogilvie, who was the son of the Earl then, in 1746, said we must stay together and make our way back to Clover first before they disperse. So that's what they did. They came back from Ruthven up in Speyside to Clover, and then they dispersed from there. So that is the flag that was used at the reenactment of the Ogilvie Regiment. Any questions? Right. Now, it's my pleasant duty to introduce our 2 performers tonight. First of all, I'll start with Reverend Canon Dr. Robert Harley. Now, really, Bob, as we know him, needs no introduction to Kerry folk, because he was the minister of the St Mary's Episcopal Church for many years here. So Kerry folk will probably know Bob very well, but there are people here tonight who are not from Kirriemuir district, so I will give you a resume of his CV, as you can see. Sorry about that. Yes. In colloquial language, we would say that Bob was a clever loon because he got his belongs Fife actually, Glenrothes originally, and he had many O-levels and higher as well. But he went on to gain an MA Honours in Classics and Ancient History at the University of St Andrews. And from there he did a postgraduate certificate in education at the University of Cambridge. He got a PhD in Classical Greek at the University of Glasgow. He got a Theological Institute of the Scottish Episcopal Church, a BD Honours in the New Testament Greek at the University of Edinburgh. He was an assistant teacher at a well-known school in Glasgow, Hutcheson's Grammar School, and he taught Latin and Greek at Hutcheson's school. He was also a member of the Scripture Union and the Rowing Club, which probably served him in good service when he joined the Navy. He became an officer in the Royal Navy, and he was a squadron officer in the Fishery Protection Squadron, also in mine sweeping and mine hunting. And he had the rank of Lieutenant Commander then when he was in the Royal Navy. He was also involved in education within the Royal Navy too. He then became a curate at St Thomas's Episcopal Church in Edinburgh. He was an Anglican chaplain part-time in Western General Hospital in Edinburgh. And as you know, in 2000, he became rector of our St Mary's Episcopal Church in Kirriemuir. His hobbies are painting in oil and water, fine art, Nelson memorabilia, football, steam railways, Hadrian's Wall. He was a membership of the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, the Edinburgh Royal Naval Club, the Rotary Club of Kirriemuir, and the Scottish Malt Whisky Society. So, I think that's about it, Bob. I've missed out a lot there, but you'll understand. Now, the gentleman who yesterday at 2 o'clock, when I got the news that Alistair had collapsed on the stage at Balerno, he was doing a jig there and collapsed on the stage and heart attack and so on. I was frantic because the thing would have had to be cancelled if we couldn't get anybody. So after various calls and researches and that, it was a man that you know very well in Kerry, Joe Aitken, advised me about this gentleman here. Where is he? He's here. He's there. Roddy Johnston. No, I've never met Roddy Johnston. When I went, Joe Aitken couldn't give me his phone number. He could just tell me where they lived. So I went down to Morrison Street and I saw Roddy's wife, Kate, and left her with all the paperwork and told them what the problem was. So anyway, Roddy phoned me later on in the evening and said he'd be willing to do it. So I really don't know Roddy, but he's a well-known vocalist and played in a Gaelic band called the Dancing Feet at one time, and he plays in venues up and down the country. You go to England, Roddy?
Every now and then. There's a hit there.
He also does a Tuesday night in the Three Bellies Bray. Have you ever gone to the Three Bellies Bray on a Tuesday evening? It's full of people who can play the pipes and the accordion and guitars and all sorts of things, and singers as well. So really, that's about all I know about Roddy. But I'm sure I heard them earlier on when they had the rehearsal here at 4 o'clock, and I think you're in for enjoyment with what you're about to hear. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Reverend Robert Harley and Roddy Johnston.
Happy St Andrew's Day. I'd like to tell you what I'm wearing. How about that? Tartan, black Stuart. The tie, St Andrews University graduate tie. And the white rose is associated with Bonnie Prince Charlie. And I'm surrounded by them. Bought by Bob Stewart, isn't that lovely? Thank you. And I'm an honorary vice chairman of the 1745 Association. It's nice to see a few members with us tonight, including Bob. Would you like to say a few words, Roddy?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me here tonight. When they said it's a Jacobite to do with country and western music, I thought, that's right down my street.
Well, we're ready to go. The white cockade, a ribbon bow worn in the bonnet of the Scottish Highlander, symbolised his or her adherence and loyalty to the Jacobite cause, the support of the Stuart claim to the British throne. Robert Burns, Scotland's national bard, was himself a sympathiser of them. He wrote many songs which show that sympathy, but in one song in particular, he is critical of those who were sympathetic for their own ends.
Ye Jacobites by name, give an ear, give an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, give an ear. Ye Jacobites by name, your faults I will proclaim, your doctrines I won't blame. You shall hear, your doctrines I won't blame, you shall hear.
There are few nations whose history and heritage are more romantic than Scotland. And there's certainly no period in Scotland's history more intriguing, more romantic, and more controversial than that of the Jacobites.
What is right and what is wrong? By the law, by the law. What is right and what is wrong? By the law. What is right and what is wrong? The short sword and the long, the weak arm and the strong. 40 draw, the weak sword and the strong. 40 draw.
It all began in 1688. The crowns of Scotland and England had been joined some 85 years before, when the Stuart King James VI of Scotland became James I of England. When the union of the crowns came about, the Scottish court, which had been based at Holyrood, left there and moved to London. Huge social changes in Scottish life began. Until the early 17th century, and for hundreds of years at least since the Battle of Nechton's Mere in 685 AD, England had been Scotland's sworn enemy, with at least one significant encounter somewhere in between. In 1688, however, the old alliance was in place. Scotland's friends and allies were not across the border, but across the English Channel. Her trading partners were primarily France and Holland. The children of the aristocracy and the well-to-do did not go to Eton or Harrow or Oxbridge, but to Utrecht or Leiden or Paris or even Rome. But all these things would change as a result of that union. A wave of Anglophilia, in which all things English were embraced, began to sweep this country. Meanwhile, James reigned over a nation still recovering from the trauma and the bloodletting that had followed the Reformation, but a generation or two before. There was still bitter conflict between Catholic and Protestant. James was never popular among his people in Scotland. Indeed, he and his successors, Charles I, beheaded by the government of Oliver Cromwell, Charles II, and James VII of Scotland and II of England, were hated by huge sections of the two nations. It was the unpopularity of James VII and II and its attempt to force Catholicism on his subjects that led to the separate parliaments in 1688, offering the crown of the two nations to his daughter Mary and her husband and first cousin William of Orange, who were both Protestant. And so, by the separate actions of the two parliaments, Jacobitism was born.
What makes heroic strife? Famed afar, famed afar. What makes heroic strife? Famed afar. What makes heroic strife? To whet the assassin's knife, or haunt the parent's life. Be bloody war, and haunt the parent's life. Be bloody war.
The Jacobites took their name from the Latin word for James, Jacobus. Their fundamental belief was that the House of Stuart ruled by divine right, and so no parliament had power to strip them of their crown. To the Jacobites, James VII and II was the legitimate monarch and would remain so until his death or abdication. To the followers of William, Parliament was omnipotent, and a king could rule only so long as Parliament allowed. William and Mary were far from popular in Scotland. Huge tracts of the country, especially in the north and the east, were Jacobite in sentiment. John Graham of Claverhouse, Bonnie Dundee, was the first Scottish nobleman to revolt against these new monarchs.
To the Lord's Convention was Claverhouse spoke, ere the king's crown go down, there are crowns to be broke. So let each cavalier who loves honour and me, let him follow the bonnets, no bonny Dundee. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, saddle my horses and call out my men, unhook the west port and let me gang free. Or it's up we the bonnets, so bonny Dundee.
In April 1689, Dundee raised the standard of King James on Dundee law. The first Jacobite rising had begun. To quell this rising, the government of the Scottish Estates the Parliament in Edinburgh, sent an army under the command of Major General Hugh Mackay. The opposing forces met on the 27th of July 1689 at the pass of Killiecrankie. The two armies were lined up staring at each other for some 2 hours, and then, when the sun was no longer in their eyes, the army of Claverhouse charged. The battle was short-lived. Some estimate as short as 3 minutes. King William's army was routed. Their casualties numbered some 2,000 men killed, wounded or captured.
Waar heb je been, say brala? Waar heb je been, so brandio? Where have you been, so brala? Come ye by Killiecrankie, and if you had been where I've been, you would never be say and if you had seen what I have seen from the braes of Killiecrankie.
The price of the Jacobite victory was enormous. A musket shot struck Claverhouse, killing him instantly. The victory that the Jacobite army had won at Killiecrankie was short-lived. Within months they had been routed at Dunkeld, and the rebellion of 1689 was over. King William, anxious to endear himself to the clans of Scotland, made an offer to them in August 1691. He said that if they swore allegiance to him, then he would offer them his amnesty and his protection. Let them take their oaths by the 1st of January 1692, he said, or be punished. Many clans, loyal to the man they regarded as their rightful king, James VII, could not swear allegiance to the man who had usurped his crown, except with their king's consent. They would ask their king, now over the water in France, but his reply did not come till he wrote from Paris on the 12th of December. It would be several days before the clan chiefs would learn of their king's decision. One clan in particular was of interest to William and his advisers, the MacDonalds of Glencoe, long-time enemies of Argyll and his Campbells, condemned by many as cattle thieves and detested by the new Scottish establishment. There were many who hoped they would not take the oath, including Sir John Dalrymple, Viscount Stair, the king's principal adviser in Scotland. Stair had been a member of the entourage of James VII, but being politically astute or utterly unprincipled, he was now King William's man in Scotland. MacIan, Alistair MacDonald, chief of the MacDonalds of Glencoe, was loyal to his Stuart king, and like so many of the clan chiefs in Scotland, had no time for a usurper. He waited for word from his king over the water, and when it came towards the end of December, he decided, reluctantly, and for the sake of his clan, to take that oath of allegiance. Accordingly, he set out with his gillies for Inverlochy to present himself before Colonel John Hill, governor of Lochaber, and there he would swear allegiance on behalf of his clan to this Dutch king who had been thrust upon the Scottish people. He set off in a snowstorm. and arrived with but 24 hours of the year left. There, Macian discovered to his horror that Colonel Hill could not administer the oath. It could only be done by a sheriff, and the nearest was in Inverary, some 75 miles away. It was touch and go as to whether Macian could make the journey from Inverlochy to Inverary on time. He and his gillies set off in foul weather on that fateful journey. They did not arrive until the 2nd of January 1692, when they received dreadful news. Sir Colin Campbell of Arkinglass, Sheriff of Argyll, was not at home. He was still celebrating New Year with his family across Loch Fyne. It was 3 days later when Campbell of Arkinglass returned to Inverary. On Monday, 5th of January 1692, he sent for Macian and told him to return the following day, and on that day, Tuesday the 6th of January 1692, Macian swore his allegiance to King William and Queen Mary, asking their pardon and craving their protection. He would soon enough discover what that meant. Sir John Dalrymple, Master of Stair, hated Jacobites and despised Highlanders. He learned that Macian had not taken the oath by the 1st of January, and he wrote to Sir Thomas Livingston, then Commander-in-Chief of the King's Army in Scotland. Stair produced a warrant signed by the King himself for the annihilation of the MacDonalds of Glencoe. When he applied for that warrant, he didn't tell either Livingston or the Privy Council that Macian had signed the oath, even though late. On the first Monday of February 1692, Robert Campbell of Glenlyon arrived in Glencoe with 2 companies of the Earl of Argyll's regiment and asked Macian for bed and board with his clan. In accordance with the tradition of Highland hospitality, he and his troops were extended that bed and board. Glenlyon received his orders a few days later. You are hereby ordered to fall upon the rebels, the MacDonalds of Glencoe, and put all to the sword under 70. This is by the King's special command. See that all is put into expediency. And so, at 5 o'clock in the morning on the 13th of February, after enjoying the hospitality of the MacDonalds for some 10 days, the Campbells struck against their hosts. Throughout Glencoe, many of the clan were murdered, including Macian. He was shot in the back as he tried to get out of his bed. At Inverrigan, Invercoe, Carnach, Achnacon and Antreochan, MacDonalds were murdered. Their houses were burned and their cattle dispersed. Some 300 odd of the clan fled to the hills, where many would die of cold or hunger. An outcry arose against this barbarity. The nation was outraged. Parliamentary pressure forced Stair to resign, but he was subsequently given an earldom in consolation. King William defied all attempts of the Scottish Parliament to instigate a formal inquiry or mount a prosecution of those responsible. Hardly surprising, he was the one who had signed the warrant. That day, the 13th of February 1692, must be one of the darker days in the history of our nation. But this appalling episode was a propaganda gift to the Jacobites. There is no knowing the amount of support the Jacobite cause was given both here and abroad as a result of the treachery of Glencoe. Other events made King William's reputation in Scotland even blacker. England flourished, but in Scotland grain prices rose, thousands died of hunger or typhus, 1 Scot in 6 was reduced to begging, the country was in its sorriest and most hopeless state, and the noble white cockade, once so proudly and defiantly worn, all but a memory.
Aye on Castle Walk at the close of the day, I heard a man sing, though his head it was grey. And as he was singing, the tears soon came. There will never be peace till Jamie comes in. The church is in ruins, the state is in jars, delusions, oppressions, and murderous woes. We darnay will say, but we can vastly. There will never be peace till Jamie comes in. My 7 braw sons for Jamie drew sought, but now I greet round their green beds in the yard. It brak the sweet heart o' my faithful and babe. There will never be peace till Jamie comes in.
There had been a fiasco of a rising in 1719, and there were periodic riotings, but there was nothing of substance until July 1745, when 7 men landed at Moydart. One of them was Prince Charles Edward Stuart, otherwise known as Bonnie Prince Charlie. He had come from France on a little frigate called Le Dutile, and on the 19th of August, he raised the Jacobite standard at Glenfinnan and proclaimed his father king.
Lads, we the Fellebeck, down by the Tummel, or banks o' the Garry, saw ye the lads wi' their bonnets and white cockades, leaving the mountains to follow Cher. Follow thee, why wouldn't I follow thee? Long hast thou loved and trusted and fail
Cameron of Lochiel, MacDonald of Morar, and MacDonald of Keppoch all rallied round, and the Great Rising of 1745 was underway. By the 4th of September, the Jacobite army had reached Perth with no resistance. It was there that they were joined by the younger brother of the Duke of Atholl, Lord George Murray, who would become the military genius of the 45. They moved on to Edinburgh, and the capital city fell to the Jacobite army on the 17th of September, with hardly a shot being fired. The castle, however, did not surrender. Sir John Cope was the commander-in-chief of the government forces in Scotland. He took his army to East Lothian, and there, just outside Prestonpans, he fought the Jacobite army for the first time. The battle lasted only 10 minutes or so, and Cope's army was routed.
Cope sent a challenge straight Dunbar, saying, "Shirley, meet me if you da, I'll learn you the art so on. If you'll meet me in the morning, hey Johnny Cope, are you walking yet? Are your drums beating yet? You were walking, I would wait. Take on to the coals in the morning." When Shirley looked the letter upon, he drew his sword, a scabbard from "Come follow me, the merry men, and we'll meet Johnny Cope in the morning. Hey Johnny Cope, are you walking yet? Or are your drums beating yet? If you were walking, I would wait. Take on to the coals in the morning.
The results of Prestonpans were many. On the government side, Cope was relieved of his post and court-martialed. General Wade, of road-building fame, was appointed Commander-in-Chief North Britain in his place. On the Jacobite side, the victory brought recruits to their army in unprecedented numbers. The army doubled in size. In London, there was confusion. The government brought back 6,000 troops from Holland under the command of William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, younger son of His Britannic Majesty, the German George II. He would subsequently play an appalling role in the months to come. On the 3rd of November, against the advice of his military commanders, Charles decided to invade England. 12 days later, in heavy snow, Carlisle fell without a shot being fired. By the end of that month, Penrith, Lancaster, Preston and Manchester had all fallen. On 4th of December, Charles and his army had reached Derby. London was in panic. Shops were closing. The Bank of England, fearing a run on money, was paying out in sixpences. Thousands were evacuating the city. Meanwhile, in the Jacobite councils, despite the optimism of Charles, a decision to retreat was taken. That decision was prompted by a number of things. Charles had assured his followers that thousands of English Jacobites would join them when the army reached northern England. No more than a few hundred did, while Cumberland was amassing an army of up to 30,000 men. The 5,000 or so in the Jacobite army would be no match. Reluctantly, Charles agreed to turn back, and on Black Friday, 6th of December 1745, his army began its fateful retreat. When they reached Carlisle, Charles insisted that 400 men remain to garrison the castle. The rest of his army continued their retreat. When the government troops reached Carlisle, they bombarded the castle for 2 days, and the Jacobite forces there surrendered. Their officers were hanged, the men transported to the West Indies. On Christmas Day, Charles reached Glasgow. There was no word of welcome for him. The city was staunchly Hanoverian. He would later say that nowhere in the world had he found so few friends as in Glasgow. He must have looked in the wrong places. All was not gloom and doom for him, however. It was during his stay in Glasgow that he met and fell in love with Clementina Walkinshaw, who would later become his mistress. Cameron of Lochiel, an advisor of Charles, persuaded the Jacobite army to behave peacefully. The council of the city were so grateful that they conferred upon him and his descendants the right to have the bells of the toll booth rung whenever he was in town, a privilege, incidentally, which still obtains. Charles and his army stayed till the 3rd of January. Meanwhile, Lochiel had persuaded the city to make clothing and supplies available to his soldiers. When they left Glasgow, Charles and his army left with £10,000 in cash, 12,000 shirts, 6,000 coats, 6,000 pairs of shoes and stockings, and 6,000 blue bonnets. They headed for Falkirk, and here they met and defeated the army of General Harley. Harley lost 400 of his men, while Charles lost only 40. Harley, a brute of a man, accused his army of cowardice and hanged 60 of his troops on that charge. Charles led his army on to Inverness, and on the 16th of February, the garrison in Inverness Castle surrendered. The Jacobite army went on to Fort Augustus, which surrendered after 2 days of fighting. They then attacked Fort William and spent a month laying unsuccessful siege to that town. The government then dispatched reinforcements commanded by the Duke of Cumberland. On Monday, the 14th of April, Cumberland had led his troops up the east coast of Scotland and was encamped at Nairn. The following day, Charles, foolishly, following the advice of O'Sullivan, one of his generals, decided to attack Cumberland's army that night, and so the Jacobite army set off from Drumossie Moor, where they had been encamped, and headed east to Nairn. Charles's generals, O'Sullivan and Murray, argued bitterly on the march. Murray was opposed to the idea, and several halts were called. Dawn broke, and still the Jacobites had not reached Nairn. Ahead, they could hear the drums beating the general call. Cumberland's army was awake. Attack was impossible. The chance was gone. The Jacobites trooped back to Drumossie Moor, tired, cold, and hungry. For 2 days they had fed on nothing but biscuits and water. When the government troops came later that morning, they were 9,000 in number. They were faced with fewer than 5,000 fatigued, dispirited, and desperately hungry men, ill prepared for any battle. Culloden was a slaughter. Cumberland used his artillery to good effect. Within an hour, the battle was over. 100 Highlanders died on that field. The Hanoverian dragoons slaughtered fugitive clansmen and innocent bystanders alike, men, women and children. Everyone in Highland clothing was a rebel, and every rebel deserved to die. The Scots people gave Cumberland a sobriquet, and seldom could any have been more warranted. They called him the Butcher, and the pillage and the carnage perpetrated in the king's name after Culloden in the Highlands, aye, and in the Lowlands too, amply justified that title. The folklore of Culloden weeps with horrifying tales of merciless revenge. The atrocities went on and on. Troops were sent far and wide to search for rebels. Glens were laid waste. The jails and prison hulks all over Britain were overflowing with Jacobite captives. The hangman's rope sang at York and Carlisle. In London, the Privy Council had decreed that Jacobite prisoners would be tried in England, lest Scottish judges and juries were too soft. Lord President Forbes, Scotland's most senior judge and a stout Hanoverian, wrote to London protesting. London ignored him. Cumberland was given a hero's welcome when he returned home. His father increased his civil list allowance from £15,000 a year to £40,000 a year. In 1746, that was not bad. The other German who lived in London, George Frederick Handel, composed an anthem in his honour, See the Conquering Hero Come. Remember its origin when next you hear it. Cumberland, of course, had advocated a solution to the Highland problem, the transportation of whole clans, such as the Camerons and almost all the branches of the MacDonalds. Lord Rosebery, Liberal Prime Minister in 1894, would say of Culloden and its aftermath, no blacker, bloodier page will be found in the history of any country than that which records the atrocities committed against a brave but vanquished enemy, perpetrated at the command and under the eyes of a British monarch's son. The English named a flower after him. You know it? Sweet William. To the Scots, it has always been known as the Stinking Willie. And that perhaps says it all. Steps were taken immediately in London to ensure that there would never be another uprising. Legislation was rushed through Westminster, making the carrying of arms a capital offence and limiting the power of clan chiefs. The bagpipe was declared an instrument of war. The wearing of tartan was also prescribed, and the penalty for both of these offences, bagpipes and tartan, was transportation. After Culloden, Charles Edward Stuart escaped, and with the help of Flora MacDonald, in a variety of disguises, he reached the Isle of Skye. Of Flora MacDonald, Samuel Johnston would write, "Her name will be mentioned in history, and if courage and fidelity are virtues, mentioned with honour."
Sing along. Speed, bonny boats, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors fly. born to be king over the sea to sky. Loud the winds howl, loud the waves roar, thunderclaps rend the air. Baffled our foes stand on the shore, although they will not dare. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Hardy the lad that's born to be king over the sea to sky. Many's the lad fought on that day, well the claymore did we. When the night came, silently lay dead Culloden's field. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Harry the lad that's born to be king over the sea to sky. Though the waves leap, soft shall he sleep, ocean's a royal bed. Rocked in the deep, Flora will keep watch by your weary head. Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Harry the lad that's born to be king over the sea to sky.
These prohibitions of the bagpipe and the tartan would endure from 1746 until 1782, a period of 36 years. Robert Burns called them horrible years. Regiments were recruited from the Highlands. In the latter part of the 18th century, the Highlands were drained of 27 line regiments and 19 battalions. What better way of ensuring that the Highlander could never rise again?
There were twa bonny maidens, three bonny maidens, come o'er the mensch, come o'er the main, whither went for their way, and the Corrie for their aim, and they're dearly welcome to Skye again. Come along, wi' your boatie and your song, my ain bonny maidens, my twa bonny maids, for the night it is dark, and the red coat is gone, and you're all fairly welcome to Skye again.
Bonnie Prince Charlie escaped to France in September 1746 after hiding in the Western Isles for 5 months. In spite of a bounty of £30,000 on his head, the equivalent of about £6 million today, he was never betrayed. He remained in France for only 2 years and went on to Rome, where he died on the 31st of January 1788, wrecked by drink and debauchery. He never returned to that kingdom whose throne he had claimed. I'm sure that's not right. He came to London, didn't he? Eric says he did, so it must be true. Yeah. This is not my script. I'm reading it that Len, who was supposed to come, wrote it. Many romantic songs have been written about Prince Charlie, especially by Lady Nairn, writing under the name of Caroline Oliphant, which possibly over-romanticised the whole affair. But she and others had not written those songs, then the whole episode may well have been relegated to just another ordinary minor incident in history. The legacy of the Jacobite risings was paranoia on the part of the London government, despair on the part of many Highlanders, and mass emigration to the New World, Scotland would never be the same again. Or will it?
Bonny cherries, Uawa, safely o'er the friendly way. Money ahead will break and twa. Again he ne'er come back again. Will ye no come back again? Will ye no come back again? Better loot ye honey be. Will ye no come back again? Ye trusted in ye healing men. They trusted you, dear Jenny. They kent your hiding in the glen. Your Clayton was but barely. Can you no come back again? Will you no come back again? Better lose ye canny be. Will you no come back again? English brides were in vain, and in the poor we may be. Cellar Canon by the heart that beats I for thine and thee. Will you no come back again? Will you no come back again? Better love you can't be. Will you no come back again? Sweet's the lavrock's note and land, lilting widely up the glen, but he sings to me a song. Will he no come back again? Will you no come back again? Will you no come back again? Better lose you can't be. Will you no come back again? Will you no come back again? Will you no come back again? Better lose you can't be. Will you no come back again?
Well, yes, ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you born an Englishman, but I have to say that my heart burns proud from coming from strong ancestors in Glenmorrison. My 7th great-grandfather, who was at Culloden with his brother Robert, and they decided, they were both injured, and they were with, my 7th grandfather was with his 1-year-old son and wife, and he decided the best place to hide was amongst the English. So he and Robert and his wife and baby son made their way down to London. Sadly, Robert didn't make it. He was arrested somewhere in the Midlands and he disappeared to Barbados, and we've never heard from anything about him since. So I'm standing here as a proud incomer, if you like. I have lived in Scotland for quite a lot. I was brought up in Glasgow, I lived in Edinburgh, and so on and so forth. So I'm here to give a vote of thanks to quite a few people that's made tonight possible. To John, the church officer and hallkeeper, who actually has lent a good hand today in helping setting this up, getting it warm and putting stuff out as we wanted it. To the church administrator, Liz Reed, for all her help in making arrangements and selling tickets. To Bill and Helen Atkinson for all their help in selling tickets and providing the food and refreshments, which I hope we're all going to partake shortly. The Kirriemuir Saltire branch committee members for organising all the events. And of course, a friend and colleague, met several times, Reverend Canon, Dr. Robert Harley, the narrator. Thank you, Bob. And I've never heard anything like that. I've heard lots of ballads all over Dumfries. Roddy, you're a star. He's near star.